All right, folks, welcome. Welcome back to the podcast. I am Sean, one of your togers. Okay, let's kick this off. So, I've titled this podcast, and by the way, for those of you that have been a while, I know it's been a while since I have posted. My life right now is kind of in an intertwined web of chaos right now. So, I haven't been posting all that much. I do apologize, but that's not stopping me from posting. And I unfortunately am neglecting you guys. So this is going to be a pretty detailed, pretty good podcast for you. Um, I do have my snacks, my drinks, and all that good stuff. Now, I do have something sweet here on the side, aka slice of cake, but I'm going to dive into that later. Um, so this podcast is pretty much all in lieu of what happened tonight, but this is a good podcast because this is going to help you guys understand the mentality of people with autism. Okay. So, full disclosure, like I've told you guys in this channel, I am autistic. I am on the minor spectrum, meaning I have a high functioning level skill set of autistic skills. Okay. And I don't need somebody to pretty much assist me in my day to day social skills, right? Now, I do need to ask for clarification with my peers, but that doesn't mean someone needs to be beside me in order for me to understand what's going on. Like, if I was to go do my day to day activities, I wouldn't necessarily need somebody to go tell me, hey, it's time to go brush your teeth, right? I would just say, hey, it's time to go to bed. I should probably go brush my teeth. So I'm going to get up wherever I am, go to the sink, brush my teeth, and come back. Not even think about it, right? Okay. So that's on the major spectrum, right? That's the low functioning, those that need extra assistance. Okay. Um, Now, having said that, one of the things that I did in my podcast title was I titled it, I am listening, but I may not fully understand. So let me put that into play for you. Um, for a while growing up, pretty much I have been watching, my mom and my dad cook, meals and do stuff for us and teach us how to grow up and be regular, civilized human beings. I'm 38 years old. Um, and so I don't know if you guys are in that kind of household, but I was growing up in a military household, and we have a pretty strict set of rules in the military household family. Um, you can't be out past the dark lights. You can't be up when you're not supposed to after you go to bed. TV shows were pretty much kind of restricted until we were of the adult age, pretty much. Like your Austin Powers, I didn't get to see that until I was about 16 or 17 years old, right? While they were with us, right? So it was kind of like that very constricted, very restricted um, lifestyle, okay? And as I was going through my life, my mom and my dad pretty much was the one who practically raised me because, I was like attached to my dad. Um, and it was pretty much the same with my brother. My brother and I are about 50 months apart. I was born in February of 86. And he was just after I was born, about, I don't know, a year and some months later. Um, so I was pretty much watching my mom and my dad cook. Now, as they were cooking, I'd be like, "Oh, that's so cool." Like, for example, let's say they're making pancakes. They would put the ingredients together. I'm like, ugh, whatever. They're adding powder in a bowl. It's boring. They're adding water in a bowl. That's boring. And they mixed it up and it made a batter. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then they said, here, watch this. So they took a scoop, like a big old, it was back then we used a measuring cup. It was like a fourth of a cup or a third of a cup. And it made the perfect pancake size. So we did it. We scooped it up out of a mixing bowl and we put it on the griddle and like, whoa, that's pretty cool. So stuff like that intrigued us. It wasn't like for you guys where it's just going to make a pancake, whoop de doo. Like for us, it was pretty cool. For me, not realizing I was on the spectrum, I was always intrigued by it, right? I was always entertained. And so as time went on, I looked at the way they were doing it, the way they were cooking it, the way they were just prepping and doing all this movement. And like, you put this bowl here, you put this utensil here, you put this in here. You got to wait till this gets hot and all that. Now, I did learn that lesson too. Don't think I didn't learn the lesson. If you put your hand on top of the stove, it's going to be hot. Don't think I didn't learn that lesson because my family grew up well. Well, if you're not going to listen to what I'm going to say, you're going to listen the hard way. Okay. Now, they didn't just let us hurt ourselves. I don't want you to get that idea, okay? But if it was a severe issue to our safety, they stepped in and said no and pulled us away from it. But those days where it's like, okay, if you're not listening to me, you're going to find out the hard way. You're not going to like it, right? Like if we go out, like it's pretty, bone chill cold. Like you're not going to want to do it, but I want to do it. You're not going to do it, but I want to do it. So I said, okay, fine. So he went out there, and sure enough, we fell flat out on our face. And we were cried, and like, okay, so it's cold. We learned a lesson. When it's cold outside, we're not going to want to go out. So we carried that throughout our life. It's like, well, I see, I told you. The same thing applies here to cooking. So for a while, I learned how to make it, a few meals and stuff like that. One of the meals that I'm pretty proud of myself, even being on the spectrum, is that I learned how to make shrimp scampi from scratch. The scampi sauce, the pasta, the shrimp, how to peel it, how to devein it, how to prepare it, all that good stuff, right? How to soak it and all that. Yeah, if you want a meal cooked by, an Italian, I'll make you a good meal. I promise, my friend. It was a bad, it's a bad impression, but I'll cook you a good meal nonetheless. But that's not the point. I mean, it is the point, but it's not of this video. So, just recently, as in maybe a year and a half ago, we decided we're going to start smoking. Smoking. Oh, wait, no, not a year ago. This was right around COVID because there really wasn't much to go out and eat. There really wasn't much to do anytime. So, what more to do than to smoke food, right? Just try it. So, we got food prepared and we went ahead and cooked it and smoked it and like, this tastes pretty good. We ended up smoking, seafood and grilled that stuff and added some smoke flavor. And then we decided to go from that to trying pulled pork, like pork shoulder. And so the first batch pulled out pretty tough, but it tasted great. I mean, it was freaking good. Like the flavor, spot on. Um, we didn't really get the smoke ring, but we got the flavor. And then we tried brisket. I know if you can't get the pulled pork, why even go to brisket? So he's like, all right, we're going to try brisket. So we tried brisket. That went better. Didn't go great, but it went better. Surprisingly, right? You'd think, how's that going to go better if you can't even do the basic of basics? Keep in mind, we have not smoked ribs since, right? I know, weird. That's the first thing you usually smoke because it's easy. It's thin. It doesn't have much meat on it, but the flavor is good. Sorry, guys, you have to excuse me. We have pollen and it's making my eyes itch. Um, okay. So we decided to do a whole lot back in during COVID, which was 2020. Skip forward a couple of years, and my dad and I had been, pretty much note taking on how we do these. Like, for example, you guys aren't aware, but I did my own version of pork shoulder. And I cooked it and I smoked it and I prepped it and did all that good work myself and all that good stuff. So, having had said that, I would like to show you the kinds of things that I'm talking about. I'm listening, but I may not fully understand. Okay, so this is a note to myself. It's going to be hard to read because of my webcam quality. But you see all that? You see all those notes? Those notes are to tell me at 1 p.m., you season the pork. At 1 p.m., you set the temp on the smoker to 230. At 3:30, you check the pork. At 5:15, you check it again. Now at 5:45, you reduce the temp to a little bit, and then at 6 p.m., you check the temperature, the internal temperature, and then at 6:40, you add some more wood chips. So as I'm going down here, I'm doing a list of stuff, right? So I'm taking notes. I may not understand it, but I am taking notes. I am listening, right? Listening is not the same thing as doing, John. Okay, but hear me out. If let's say that my dad was doing all this and I was taking all these notes, I'd still be doing the same thing. I'd still be note taking on what was going on, some observations, like science class. You're basically doing science class as you're smoking, right? Taking your observations, what changed, what didn't change, what increased, what decreased, what looks the same, what doesn't look the same. All these kinds of things you jot down, okay? Now, I had been doing all these notes and all these observations. Now, the other day, I was having surf and turf. I grabbed some lobster tails that were pre-prepared, pre-cut, all that pre-wrapped. You know those styrofoam trays with the plastic wrap? Okay, so there were a pack of 4, and I grabbed that. I grabbed a pork butt, and I grabbed a rack of ribs. Okay, I grabbed all that, and because I knew I was going to cook that later, right? I don't always just grab what I'm going to grab to cook and then go grab what I'm going to grab to cook the next night. I usually grab what I'm going to cook, freeze it, and then prepare it and cook it the next day. So a couple days later, I'm like, you know what I really want? I really want ribs. I want to smoke them. So the other night, which was like 2 nights ago, I grabbed out pork of the pack of it was a full rack of baby back pork ribs. All right. Now I let them thaw. I let them thaw for a while, for about a couple hours. And you know when the plastic is frozen, you can't mallet at all. You can't bend it. You can't twist it. It's a brick. You could drop it and hear a tunk, right? But when it's unfrozen, the plastic wrap packaging, you can move it, twist it, bend it, and all that, and the meat's still inside, right? That's what you want. You want it to be bendable and flimsy and all that as it's thaw, right? That's where you want to prepare it. You don't want it in the middle. You want it completely thawed. Okay, that's a secret in the cooking pork, if you will. Just let you guys know. You want it completely thaw. Um, Almost to the point where it's kind of like more than room temperature, but not really. So, and anyway, so I let that thaw, and then the next night was right around midnight. I took a couple of seasoning containers, like shakers. One of them had pineapple and mango. One of them had garlic. One of them had some red pepper. One of them had some cinnamon. One of them had a good blend of other spices in it. So it was 3 of them. And I took a big portion, and I took a ramekin. Now, ramekin is a like a porcelain ceramic type dish that you can use to serve. It's usually used to serve creme brulee, right? But I use it to mix stuff with. Now, as I used it to mix it, I didn't use a 1-to-1 ratio, but I used it to a 1-to-1 ratio on a few things, right? So I have, let me show you. You see those 3 right here? 1, 2, 3. So these 2 right here, I used a 1-to-1 ratio. All right. These 2, I used a 1-to-3 ratio. This is 1 parts to every 3 of these. Okay. So it was kind of a weird portion, right? But then I took them all, and in that ramekin, as you can see, right in this dish, right here. Okay. Let that focus. All right. I took a fork and I stirred it, right? And then I put on some gloves, right? I usually use like these ones. All right. I use these babies. Okay. Um Now this really doesn't have anything to do with the video, but I want to tell you guys something. Get you a pair of these that you can use, these disposable ones, okay? For the reason that A, you're dealing with raw meat, B, you don't have to clean up yourself and you're gonna be going through a whole bunch of stuff. C, I don't like let me show you something. You can't see it well, but aha, okay? See these 2 spots? They're dirt spots. Now, I've cleaned the absolute bejesus out of my hands, and you can still see these. That's something that bothers me. It's like an OCD bothersome type of thing, right? It bothers me. Wearing these, you're not gonna get that on your fingers, right? You can just tear them right off, okay? So I usually keep a pack of them. If you look around, you can actually get like a carton. I say carton, but it's basically a carton of 10 boxes of 100 gloves. So you have 1,000 of them. So they're pretty much indispensable for you, okay? But have a pair nonetheless. So I grabbed my glove, I put them on, and then I took the seasoning, I put a big portion in my hands, and then I took the glove and pretty much sprinkled them on there. And as I sprinkled them on there, I pat the meat down. All right. Let me show you guys something. This is why I wore them. So that's what it looks like as I put the seasoning on there. You guys see that? You guys see how there's a whole bunch of seasoning on there all over the meat, right? This is a more accurate color representation of what it looked like. Okay. For those of you guys that are listening to my podcast right now, um, I used a baby back pork rib rack, and the color looks like fish. It looks like salmon fish, like red snapper fish. When you season the color, you want that orange and red color. You don't want that really bright white and pink color. You want that dark red, that, kind of orange, that almost fuchsia type color on your barbecue when you add enough seasoning to it. You don't want a crust of this seasoning. Do you understand me? You don't want to have a crust like a bark before you even cook it. The bark is supposed to be after it's smoked, after it's cooked for a long time. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of a disclosure here, a sneak peek, right? That is bark right there. Okay. That skin that you see right here, this part right here, okay? Not in between where it's cracked, but the part that's solid. That's the bark in cooking terms, okay? So you take your glove, right, with your seasoning and you put it in your hand and then you sprinkle it, but you don't want to sprinkle like you're sprinkling um what do you call it? Like sugar, right? You take a huge wad in your hands, like a pretty good size, and you're sprinkling it like almost like salt, like salt and pepper. Like you're gonna pretty much give it the whole rundown of it. All right. So we did that. Well, I did that for a while, and then I put it on this tray. Okay, and I did that because I've seen this done, I've heard this done, and I've watched this done. Okay. Now, remember, I'm listening. I may not fully understand. Okay. You're going to hear me say this because it's all going to come together at the very end. Okay. So we smoked it. And then what you're seeing, that red stuff. So I cooked it in a smoker just like that. I didn't add sauce. I didn't add butter. I did nothing. I just used regular seasonings. Okay. I put that in there at 130. I smoked it for 5 hours. Now, there's a saying in the barbecue business, low and slow. Does anybody know what low and slow is? Low and slow refers to the temperature and time when you cook. You want to cook it at a low temperature for a long time. Why? Because you're trying to break down the collagen that holds the fibers together. So, what you're doing is before you cook it, it's all holded together, right? Really strong, really firm, right? over time, the stuff tends to get loose to the point where, like, when you go to a barbecue place, all you gotta do is pull it off, and you got a chunk. Pull it off, you got a chunk. But before, it was strong like this, so it's called low and slow. Now, I cooked it like this for 5 hours, didn't touch it, didn't move it, didn't attend to it, 5 hours. Peaked it at 5:30, right? It went in at about 12:45. So, now, I went out and I got some butcher paper, which is what that red paper is, okay? I wrapped it and I said, "This is gonna be good." Now, what I ended up doing was I ended up putting some water on it to make it malleable because, again, I've seen it done, I've watched it done, it makes sense. So, I am listening, I may not fully understand. So then, um, word gets around, and then we ended up, um I say we, I'm talking about me, my head, and my thought process, and my hands. It's all one team, we, okay? So we ended up basically wrapping it tight in butcher paper, and I left it in there for another hour, okay, at the same temperature, but I decreased the temperature a little bit, but not too much, because I wanted the internal temperature to reach about 180, 190, so that by the time we ate it, it was about 150, right? It was cooked, but we don't want it too hot. We want it at serving temperature. So then I opened it back up, and at this time, I was having my dad over for dinner. That part. This is where it gets good because my dad's the one who taught me growing up. Now it's my turn. Originally, I was just going to have it to make to then take to me with my work colleagues, right? I mean, I didn't have enough for all of them, but as they were eating their dinner and as I was having break time, I'd pull out what I made, which was barbecue, and have it for lunch. Well, lunch, break dinner, whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's the same thing, different terms. Any case, I decided, all right, I'll see what's going on. So he comes in the front door, and I said, hey, word around the street is you want to go have some barbecue. Not even realizing that I cooked this whole rack for today, right? And he's like, "Well, I was, but do you think there's enough for the both of us?" And I said, "Well, I really do think so because it's a full rack. I mean, it's a full slab. It's probably about, I don't know, 15, 17 bones." So I said, "All right, cool. Let's see what it looks and we'll give it a shot." And I said, I basically covered it in butcher paper at 5:30. He goes, "Well, okay, if worst comes to worst, we can always go out if we need to, go eat something to eat. Like, okay, it's not gonna hurt my feelings, but we'll see. Like, I'm really crossing my fingers. So then I go out there and we ended up jacking the temperature up just a little bit to get it to where we need to be. And at this point, I have not added barbecue, no butter, no vinegar, no water, nothing, just cooked. So then I brought it out and then I took the butcher paper like this, all wrapped up, and I opened it up. That is what it looked like. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I did not expect to open and see competition color, competition crust, competition flavor. I was blown away. Drum roll, please. So was my father, who taught me how to cook for 35 years. All comes back full circle. I may be listening, but I may be also not understanding. That was not the case tonight. So, along the process, people like us with autism may not understand the process, but we understand the end result. We understand the end goal. We just may not know or may not get there the same way you get there, but we will get there. So we sit down. I said, "Hey, I'm going to cut these in half and we're going to have them. Would you guys that are watching this podcast like to see the result?" There you go. Let me see if I can reduce the brightness so you can actually see this on camera. Look at that. If you look, there is a very slight smoke ring on the edges, but not much. Folks, there was no sauce added. There was nothing else added to it. We had a container of barbecue sauce on the counter to enjoy them. That's what I could not eat. That's what we could not eat. We were so full. It was about maybe 2, 3, or 4 ribs left. We enjoyed them. After he was done, he said, "That was the best rack of ribs I've ever had, Sean. Ever. The flavor, the color, the texture. The only critique, Sean, that I'm going to give to you, if you'd had cooked it a little longer and a little higher, they would have fallen off the bone. But all things considered, you nailed the color, you nailed the flavor, you nailed the texture, and you nailed the flavor." Yeah, I know I said that multiple times, but you get the point. The flavor, the color, the texture. Bing, bang, boom, right? Solid performance. So, going back to the very beginning, I am listening, but I may not understand. The entire time I was shown how to do it, I was listening. I was looking. I was hearing. Didn't comprehend it at the time, but when I did it, voila. He was mesmerized. Mission accomplished. So I was basically doing this podcast tonight, A, to kind of brag and gloat, and B, pretty much more or less to tell you people with autism, like myself, don't always understand what you're sharing with us, telling with us, um, giving to us, or presenting to us at the time. But with enough feedback, with enough time, with enough comprehension, we will understand it eventually. But if you rush it, if you rush the process, if we did rush this process, they would not have tasted this good. Let me tell you something. If I would have started these today, if I would have had them thawed today in the morning, put them in the fridge this morning around 7 o'clock, and given them until 9 o'clock to basically dry rub, brine, and then cook them from 9 until 3, that would not have given me as good of a flavor as if I prepped them 2 nights ago, thawed them around midnight. Now, I don't suggest you do it these times, but the whole process and mentality here is what I'm getting at. So stay with me. Remember, you're in the mind of an autistic individual. It makes sense, but stay with me. At midnight, we seasoned them and I came down. Now, we do have a fridge back there behind that door, and we use it to store, secondary stuff and, things that we don't have enough storage space for, in the big, pretty much kitchen upstairs. I left them in there. Okay. by 12:45 that night. Now I was up today right around the afternoon, or 11, 12 o'clock. So they had been doing all that for 12 hours. Remember, you can't rush this, right? And I knew if I didn't do it then, that I would not have gotten the flavor and the color and the texture that I got today. So I did not rush it. I did not cry because I don't have the proper time, the proper tools, the proper know how. And most of all, I didn't lack the proper confidence. Today, I was confident I could have done it more than anything. Like, I wish I had two or three more racks to do. I was that impressed with myself. But you can't rush somebody with autism to expect them to understand a pretty critical concept, right? Now, I work in a very fast paced environment as a job skill where I do and where I work. Okay. There's many instructions given out to us, but to understand what those directions are, I couldn't just understand them in 3 days. We spent 4 weeks understanding that so that when something happens, we can do it. I'll explain that in another podcast on why that's important. But going back to my original understanding here, I don't think I would have had as big of a success if I'd rushed myself today and not understood what was going on. And if I listened to what was going on and just done it, I don't think I would have had it. Because for me, I need to understand what is occurring, what is happening, kind of like a chemistry class. I need to understand when you do the experiment, while the experiment is happening, while the bubbles are forming, while the heat is rising, I need to understand why the heat is rising, why the bubbles are forming, to understand where you get to. Hey, if you add salt to a mixture, it gets cold, right? I need to understand that when you add salt, it brings up um the temperature of whatever and drastically reduces the temperature of um the item. That's why you make ice cream. You're adding salt because you're bringing down the temperature, but you're actually adding more heat, causing a chemical reaction, right? Which is a drastic drop in temperature, making it ice cold. Okay, ice cream. So for me to understand that process, when I go and cook more things now, I can understand that if I don't cook it long enough, the collagen is not going to break down. If I just cook it for an hour, it's going to be hard, tough like this forever. But if I cook it for 12, 14 hours, it'll be this loose to be able to pull the pork like I want, to be able to pull the brisket like I want. You understand? So that's how people with autism work. We need to understand what's going on. We need to understand the process so we understand your ultimate goal, your ultimate understanding, your ultimate comprehension, right? The the task, the topic. Okay, that's how we work. That's how I work. Right. So take that lesson from me tonight as an understanding for you and to you of how autism works in the autism community, right? So, um, you'll get a lot of responses from the autism community you may not understand. They may be telling you, "Hey, I'm still trying to process this. Easy," or "Hey, I'm still trying to process this. Don't rush me," or "Hey, I'm still trying to process this. I'm giving you these emotions because I can't process the emotion you expect me to process. I have to process them all and filter the rest." Okay. So, all right, guys, I'm going to leave you with all of that. I wanted to share a story, but I wanted to give you an insight mind frame as to how the autistic mind frame and mind works. Okay. Thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for joining. And next time, as always, I'm Sean, the Togo brother. I am out. Go check out my other podcast, guys. Thank y'all so much. Have a good night. Bye bye.